Today's February 19th, 2025. As a preliminary matter, this is Woody Knight, Chair of the Newbury Planning Board. Permit me to confirm that all members in persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Planning Board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Peter Pecos,
Yes.
Larry Murphy,
Yes.
Mary Stone,
Yes.
Scott Kenter,
Yes.
and Steve Mangian.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, guys. Nice to see you. Hardworking town staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Kristen Grubbs, Planning Director.
Yes.
Daniel LaRoe, Assistant Planner.
Yes.
And Martha Taylor, Special Projects Planner.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. All right. Introduction to the remote meeting. Good evening. February 19th, 2025, open meeting of the Newbury Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with the Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which extends the Governor's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL 30A 20, until March 31st, 2025. For this meeting, the Newbury Planning Board is convening by video conference via Zoom, as posted on the Planning Board's agenda, which can be found on the town's website. You may join by going to http://zoom.us and entering meeting ID number 832-7141-3056, passcode 108790, or by calling 1-929-205-6099 US and entering the meeting ID number and passcode when prompted. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that members and attendees are participating by video and or telephone conference. The meeting is also being broadcast live through local access channel cable channel 9 on Zoom and at www.tnctv.org. And the recording will be available on the Newbury Access YouTube channel. Meeting business ground rules. Before we turn to the first item on the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. As chair, I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After speakers conclude their remarks, I will go down the list of board members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. The meeting tonight includes a public hearing for the zoning amendments for annual town meeting. At 7:15, the clerk will read the legal notice. Then there will be a presentation of slides, followed by an opportunity for planning board members to speak. After board members have spoken, I will afford the public an opportunity to comment and or ask questions. I will see questions and comments through the Zoom raised hand function in the order in which the people click on the raised hand button. Finally, each vote is taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. All right. So the first thing on the agenda tonight is meeting minutes. Has everyone had the opportunity to go through the meeting minutes?
Yes.
Very good. Seeing nods anyways. Does anyone have any corrections or comments on the meeting minutes? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes for February 5th, 2025.
I'll move to approve.
Second,
Second.
thank you, Larry. Thank you, Mary. Roll call vote. Peter,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
and Steve.
Yes.
All right, and the chair votes yes as well. That gets the meeting minutes approved for February 5th, 2025. All right, next thing on the agenda is liaison and meeting reports. Up first, we have Larry for ZBA.
Yeah, thanks, Woody. Actually, the ZBA is meeting in person tonight at 7:30 at Town Hall. There's one item on the agenda that might come before the planning board. It's actually two petitions for variances for 11 and 15 Sunset Drive on the island. These are two abutting lots. If in fact the variances are granted, then we will likely see an A&R plan readjusting the lot lines between those two lots. But that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Next is Conservation Commission. That would be me. Conservation met last night. We had a few things on the agenda. The Kent's Island thing was up again. That's an interesting project they're doing there. But as far as anything that pertains to the planning board, I don't recall anything on the agenda that pertains to planning board. So, like I said, the Kent's Island thing's an interesting project, but that is that's continued to our next meeting. Kristen, MVPC?
Yep, so neither MVPC Commissioners Regional Group nor the Planners Regional Group met in January. They both have meetings coming up. The Commissioners meeting is tomorrow. I think on the agenda is some budget stuff, a couple new hires. They have a new hire in their GIS department, as well as a new economic development planner who I actually had a Zoom, hello, meet and greet and talk about economic development goals of Newbury as an introduction a week and a half ago, and she's fantastic. So definitely interested in small business growth and being a resource. And we talked about some ways to, connect. She had reviewed the Newbury's master plan already, which was great. So definitely got some ideas flowing in terms of that, just in general discussion of what the economic development needs are for Newbury. So commissioners meet tomorrow, and then the regional planners group meets next Thursday, and I believe on that agenda is a representative from the Office of Finance, the operational services for the state. So they're going to be talking about state contracts and sort of best practices in terms of procurement and things like that. So I'll be interested to learn a few things, I'm sure, at that meeting next week.
Very good.
That's it.
And that leads us to the next item on the agenda, the planners report.
All right. We've been doing a lot of preparation for today. As you all know, we've engaged all of you in our public hearing tonight, and just special thanks to Martha, who's put in a lot of hours and bringing forward some of the zoning amendments. So a lot of work on that front. Couple other interesting meetings. I joined a regional discussion about affordable housing that was held in Newburyport this morning. The North Shore Home Consortium is a federally funded affordable housing program that's actually run, it's managed out of the city of Peabody. It's been around a long time. I don't think Newbury has been super involved in it, so I'm trying to learn a little more. I want to talk some more with Martha and with Tracy about the history of that group and see. I think they have they set 5-year action plans in terms of priorities, in terms of supporting affordable housing throughout the region. And I think communities get a certain amount of funds based on a formula if they are members of the Home Consortium. And then there are also competitive grants that you can sort of connect with private developers to access additional funding. They get certain allocations from the, in terms of their budget every year. So there's some questions about the funding now and into the future, but in general, it was just a really robust conversation. There was representatives from Raleigh, West Newbury, Newburyport, Andyport, Newburyport Planner, and then some other representatives of affordable housing trust funds in those communities. And just a good, it was a listening session about what the needs are in the region and for specific communities. And as they develop their action plan over the next couple months, there will be more public meetings and opportunities for people to review the action plan and, you know, chime in on sort of different priorities. So it was good to make the connection with that group, and I'll keep you all posted on what else I learned. That's probably about it for now. We've got some updates on permitting projects that'll be on the agenda at our next agenda, March 5th. And nothing new. There, you know, been some inquiries. There's some properties on the market now that we've had some inquiries about, but in general, we've been pretty focused on getting these zoning amendments ready to go for town meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Kristen. I have 7:12. Public hearing starts at 7:15. So unless anyone has anything, or if Larry's got his joke book handy.
I've misplaced it, Woody.
Yeah, I know. You threatened us with
My
it
bad dad
multiple
jokes
times.
book has been misplaced. I'm sorry.
You're sitting on it, Larry. You're sitting on it.
Maybe.
He threatened us with it many times, so.
Well, Woody, since we have a couple minutes, tell
Yes,
us about
go ahead.
this Kent Island project that's going on through conservation right now.
It's the state owns Kent's Island, and I believe it's DCR and in the state, Fish and Wildlife. And they've got some stands of trees out there that were planted back in the day. And so they want to harvest some trees. They want to, there's 5 stands of fresh water on the island. And they've got some invasive species of weeds that they want to get rid of. And they have Phragmites too on the edges of the marsh that that's part of the plan, but that's in the future. But they really want to clean up around the fresh water for the invasive species. And they have a forestry plan. And they also have gotten permitted through the fire department, actually, a controlled burn there. So that was another method that they want to use on I believe on the edges of the property. And they're still working on their application. They've got a few things to fine tune there. And we were supposed to go on a site walk, but that was the day it snowed pretty good. So we didn't attend the site walk. So there's more to come with it, but it seems like a neat project, and they really just want to maintain Kent's Island and get it back up to snuff. And like I said, there's some forestry management practices that they want to do and cut some timber off the island. So all in all, it seems like a good project, and it's just a matter of getting it permitted, getting it going, and getting it through the process so they can continue on with what they want to do there. So, and if I might have missed something about it as well, but that's, to my knowledge, that's off the top of my head, that's what's going on there. Just, you know, with the trail maintaining and the invasive species. And they've also on the island, they've got 3 or 4 fields that still get farmed by a local farmer out there. So it's good that there's still farming practices going on Kent's Island, because it has been going on since I was a kid, and it's very important. But it was quite a property back in its day. I'm not sure how the state acquired it, but it's now in the state's hands. It's open to the public, and it's just a neat place to go and walk your dogs and check out. We used to camp there at Boy Scouts when I was a kid, so
Well,
I enjoy that tract of land there.
Woody, is there anyone who is the point person for this on conservation?
No, just, there's I can't remember, I believe his name's Ben. He's from the state and we've been talking with him and
Mhm.
trying to guide him through getting everything, the applications and the maps of what they want to do there into us proper, because, right now it's kind of not on a napkin, but just there's a few things missing in their plan, so. Once they get that through, we'll go on the site walk and we'll get a full understanding what they want to do there. It's kind of hard not putting eyes on it, they show us maps and stuff, but they get some things that they still gotta present to us, so,
Thanks, Woody.
Thanks,
Yep.
Woody.
yeah, thank you. And that brings us to 7:15 with that hot air. So it's 7:15, we'll open the public hearing for the proposed zoning amendments for the 2025 annual town meeting. And Larry, if you could, would you please read the legal notice for the public hearing?
Yeah, certainly.
tonight?
Woody.
Thank you.
Town of Newbury Planning Board Public Hearing Notice. Residents of the town of Newbury and other interested persons, please note that on Wednesday, February 19th, 2025 at 7:15 p.m., the Newbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing remotely via Zoom pursuant to MGL Chapter 48, Section 5, to consider proposed amendments to the Code of the Town of Newbury, Chapter 97 zoning as follows. General amendments to Chapter 97 zoning, which include administrative updates to the spelling of terms such as bylaw and select board, and authorizing creation of a table of contents. Article 1, General Provisions, Section 97-1A, to revise the purpose of intent. Article 4, Regulations of Overlay Districts, to revise Section 97-4E, Flood Hazard, to comply with updated FEMA requirements and associated flood maps effective July 8th, 2025. Article 5, Special Permits General, to update the title of Article 5 from Special Permits General to Special Permits. Section 97-5A1 to update general special permit provisions in this article. Section 97-5C, Open Space Residential Development, to update certain provisions. Section 97-5D, Common Driveways, to update provisions. In Section 97-5G, Registered Marijuana Dispensaries, medical marijuana treatment centers. In Section 97-5H, Marijuana establishments, to delete and update language. Article 9, Special Regulations, to add provisions to Section 97-9A, Site Plan Review, regarding decision criteria and conditions of approval. Article 10, General Regulations, Section 97-10C, Customary Home Occupations, to add a provision regarding special permit requirements and to replace Section 97-10D, accessory apartments with a new Section 97-10D, accessory dwelling units, in compliance with the requirements of the new Massachusetts Affordable Homes Act. Article 11, Administration, Section 97-11A, Enforcement, to add provisions regarding building permits. Section 97-11B, Zoning Board of Appeals, to add a provision regarding variances. Section 97-11C, Special Permit Procedures, Public Hearing, to delete this section. Section 97-11D2, Written Definitions, to revise, delete, and add definitions. The text of these proposed amendments are on file with the town clerk and in the planning office, 12 Kent Way, Suite 210, Byfield, Massachusetts, and may be viewed on the planning board section of the town's website at https://www.townofnewbury.org/planning-board/pages/proposed-zoning-and-regulation-amendments. For more information or to obtain a copy of the proposed amendments, contact the planning office at 978-465-0862, extension 336. In accordance with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which extends the governor's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31, 2025, the hearing is being conducted remotely. All persons interested or wishing to be heard relative to the proposed zoning amendments are invited to participate in the hearing remotely at the designated time from their computer, tablet, or smartphone at https://web02web.zoom.us/j/83271413056, passcode 108790, or by telephone by calling 1-929-205-6099 US and using meeting ID 832-7141-3056, or may watch the meeting live on local access cable channel 9 at www.tnctv.org by Woody Knight, Chair, Newbury Planning Board. And this notice was published in the Newburyport Daily News on February 3rd and February 10th, 2025.
Thank you, Larry. So there are two categories of proposed amendments: state and federal updates and local initiative.
Larry, could I
Woody.
ask, Woody, could I ask a quick question?
Yes,
Just for the benefit of going ahead with all these items, could somebody please give those who are not on the planning board and not in the government here or any other place, a definition of recodification? I mean, you hear it and you understand what it means, but a definition would probably help those who are looking at it for the first time and scratching their heads. English, please.
Larry, do you
Slang
want-
is good.
Do you want to?
Slang is good.
go ahead, Martha.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know if Larry wants to address this, but there's actually going to be an explanation of that farther on when we get to those specific zoning articles. So would it be okay to do it then?
I can take 20 seconds, Martha, if it
Okay.
would help. And in a very larger sense, Mary, anytime you amend a bylaw, it's a recodification of sorts. Okay, looking at in the most broadest definition of the term, what we're using it for here is an ongoing process to recodify the bylaw to make it
Right.
more user-friendly, to correct, or, for example, we have some words in it that we don't spell the same way, like bylaw, changing things like select board, board of selectmen to select board. So what this is, it's an ongoing process, and I'm going over 20 seconds now. Been going on for several years, actually, to recodify the entire bylaw and make it more user-friendly, hopefully. And Martha and Kristen and Dan and Peter Burnett, the building inspector, and town council, Lisa Mead, have the current working group for that and have put a lot of time and effort into it. So when we're talking about, in the context of this hearing, when we're talking about recodification, we're talking about that effort. And as Martha said, we'll get into it in more detail as we
Right.
go.
No, I understand, but just heading to the beginning of this meeting, to be sure that people do understand that it isn't town planning speak. It is a good way of describing it with an understanding that people don't know what.
Yeah, we're not trying to change the purpose of intent or intent of the bylaw,
No, I know. Okay,
It's just to make it a little more internally consistent and user-friendly.
right. And I was hoping this isn't for me, but it's for those who are paying attention to this.
Okay,
And I just.
sorry,
I'll
that was
just
more than
add
20
one
seconds.
Thanks, Larry.
quick thing
Right.
relative to the slide that's being shared right now, which is that the bylaw that we're all talking about, the zoning bylaw, is also called the code
Right,
of the town of Newbury. So
Right.
that actually is something I just talked to my husband about, which is the recodification is addressing the code, which is also called a zoning bylaw. So that's not always easy to understand in itself. It's a good
Thank you.
question, Mary.
thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you, Mary, and thank you, Larry and Kristen. The first time I heard recodification, I wasn't sure what it meant. So I could see others, people of the public feeling the same way.
Right.
Pete, would you like to say something?
I would, and if you wouldn't mind, could we back up one slide?
Yes.
So I think what I'd like to bring to the table as we start off this process, this discussion tonight, is this process did not occur in a vacuum at all. It has been going on for a number of years. There have been a lot of different individuals involved in bringing this final proposal for consideration tonight. And that's very, very important. We have had Martha, who's been working on this for many years, and now who's one of her major tasks is doing that. We've had both Kristen and Dan involved in this. We've had our council involved in this. As Larry indicated, there has been a work group. And I just have to say, that is the longest announcement I think I've ever heard read for a public meeting, which just goes to show us, kind of not the complexity, but the depth of what we're going to be talking about. And so it's real important that we can appreciate that there's been a lot of participation, and the intention, and I know Mary will back me up on this, the intention of this is to represent the best interests of the town, so the board can make the best recommendations for the town to advance what it needs to advance. And Woody started to talk about or what we're doing. So we can probably maybe go to the next slide. Let me just see to make sure. So this kind of breaks down what we're going to be talking about. There's two aspects here, and Woody started to talk about this. We have some state and federal things that need to be addressed because we have to be compliant, like with Article 4 with our overlay districts flood hazard, Article 9 for special regulations for site plan review, and Article 10 for accessory apartments. Now, mind you, we had an accessory apartment bylaw long before any other community in this area had it. But now we have to come up to par with what the state has come up with. So those are state and federal laws that we need to go with, because, for instance, for like floodplain, flood hazard, it's going to tie directly to people's ability to get flood insurance.
Right.
Then we have local initiatives that we need to take place and have discussions about, and this is the zoning recodification piece. We have general provisions, we have special permit permits, we have customary home occupations, and some administrative stuff. So it might seem overwhelming what we're going to do, but it's not. And so this slide kind of demonstrates what we need to do, and we have a timetable that we have to do things by. We have to present things. We have to have discussions. The select board has to vote on it. It comes back. We have to have a couple public hearings. We have to make sure everyone is comfortable and educated as much as that we can provide education and materials for, so that when it goes to a town meeting, when it's a warrant item, the community is aware of it. So our intention is to continue to do our education, to continue to promote what is best for our community, to make sure that we're where we need to be. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Mary, to that.
No, I like the idea that that we are reviewing this continually, because everything changes as we're witnessing right now in this country. A lot of things change in this town that we need to make allowances for, and to have people understand what we are doing because of those changes. And I think this is overwhelming to most people, all this information. So just to let you all know out there in the real world, that we know that this is tough stuff, but we are definitely trying to work to have it understandable for you. so that you can feel we're all working together.
Right. Thanks, Mary. And so here we are, when we look at this first, this slide, we can see that we're about in the midway point of this. We're at the point where we're having a public hearing and to have a vote, hope either tonight or at a continuation to submit this to our select board. And then our select board will have it go to our finance committee for review to see if there are any implications, and then included on our warrant. So where we started back in December, actually long before December, years of legwork, this is where we're at today, and this is what tonight's conversation is about. Great. Can we go to the next slide, I think?
Thanks, Pete.
Beautiful. So as we said, it might look overwhelming, okay? The intention here is for it not to be overwhelming. We want to make it as understandable and as palatable as possible. And we don't want people to get intimidated by terms or by article this or that, but to make it as appropriate and palatable. That's the word I think that is very helpful. Thanks. Is there something else for me to talk about, Woody, or are we on to the next slide?
No, I believe we are on to the next slide, what is the next slide? Yes, we're on to the next slide. The next slide is a list of proposed zoning amendments. And that's the list here that Larry read off to us earlier. And we are going to, I have here that Steve's going to, oh wait, what do we?
So let me
Yep,
jump in for a second, Woody. So these are the things that we need to do. Article 4, 9, and 10 are basically things that we need to tidy up for federal regulation and state regulation. So that's why those are there. And then the next slide, I think, might be regarding a federal overlay of flood hazard. I'm going to step back now because I think somebody else is going to walk now.
Yep. So I'd like to introduce Steve Mangian.
Right.
Steve, would you like to talk on this article, please?
Yes, I would. Again, I'm Steve Mangian, one of the associate member on the planning board. And speaking to the issue of the flood hazard overlay district, periodically FEMA and the state will take a look at what areas are subject to flooding. And in this case, the areas subject to flooding have been remapped. And the slide shows a picture of, which is tough to see, but you can go to the town website and see a better version, or go to the town hall and see it as well. The idea is to assure that the town is in compliance with flood zone delineation so that Newbury residents that are in the zone can continue to get flood insurance, which is an important thing for those of us that are in the flood zone. These requirements come from both the state and the federal government. In coming up with these maps, the town and the planning board have worked with FEMA and Mass DCR to see that we're depicting something that meets the requirements of the new zoning or riverine areas. I should note that I use the term riverine to emphasize that these changes affect parcels that are along a river. In the area in yellow, which you can see on the slide, are areas where there's been an expansion of the areas that are subject to the new flooding requirements. So by adopting this, we're in compliance with the state and federal requirements. Flood insurance is still available, and you're encouraged to take a look at them. Both, I should also note the town council has taken a look at this. So there's been a cast of characters, including the ones that are on this public meeting tonight, that have all taken a look at what we have to do and come up with maps that depict what we need to do. And then at town meeting, that we hope the town will adopt these changes, and then we can go from there.
Yep. Thank you so much, Steve. And for our next slide.
Yeah, I just want
Oh,
to
do you
add
wanna
one
take this?
thing,
Go right ahead.
Woody, if that's okay. Thank you, Steve. just appreciate your explanation. The changes in this map update were for the Merrimack River watershed. So those are the areas in Newbury that were remapped, are the areas along mostly the freshwater riverine area that flows into the Merrimack watershed. So FEMA does have a viewer which is linked to from our website that lists all these zoning amendments on the town website planning page. So if people are interested specifically in, where the changes are, you can click on the viewer, go in, put in your address or put a pin on the map, and then it'll zoom right in on a certain parcel. The changes that are coming to town meeting are one, to accept and adopt the maps, which, as Steve emphasized, is required for the town to stay in compliance and allow people to still be able to be a part of the flood insurance program. And there are also changes to the bylaw. That bylaw is also, we can dive into it if people have questions. And I do want to point a few minor changes that have come since the last time the planning board looked at the draft bylaw and the changes to the bylaw. I feel as though I'll wait on that, if that makes sense, Woody, and with the board to the end, so we can go through the slides and then go back and look at those couple minor changes that have come forward in the last couple weeks from review by the DCR floodplain management staff. So they're making sure that every town is putting forth a bylaw that's in compliance so that we don't find ourselves kind of out of step with FEMA at any point. But I think it would be good probably to keep going with the slides and then come back to that.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. So next slide would be on ADUs. And Scott, would you like to present the ADU slide and regulations, general regulations and accessory apartments?
Sure, Woody. Newbury has had an accessory unit bylaw since 2006, but needs to make updates to comply with the new Affordable Homes Act. The Affordable Homes Act, or AHA, is designed to encourage the development of a diversity of housing, which includes smaller, more affordable units. ADUs are now allowed by right in all zoning districts where single-family dwellings are allowed. ADUs are allowed by right if they are 900 square feet or 50% of the primary dwelling's gross square feet, whichever is less. So if one has a 2,000 square foot home, the maximum ADU size and gross square feet would be limited to 900 square feet. When building an ADU within a single family zoning district, the ADU will still need to follow current zoning regulations for that zoning district. For example, setbacks, height requirements, frontage, etc.
Very good. Yep. And that's the second slide that we're seeing now that Scott spoke on. Maximum size ADUs and so forth. Do you have anything to add, Kristen? Or we'll go on to the next one?
I think, I don't know, Martha and Dan, do you want to go through any of the changes if people have specific familiarity with the bylaw that the town has had? We sort of put together these slides that show the current bylaw and the changes that are being incorporated as part of the requirements of the Affordable Homes Act for the proposed bylaw. So I don't know if we want to just talk these through or just put them up on the screen. Maybe I'll just put them up on the screen. I think it's maybe helpful to note that there are, because of the timing with this legislation, we recognize that the most important thing is to be in compliance with the state and be consistent with the law that already went into effect in early February. I do think there were some discussions that we've had among the board and with members of the zoning board and members of the public, that there may be some categories of allowances for ADUs that would be appropriate to consider for a special permit rather than by right. So those are discussions we thought it would be helpful to have more time for. So I do anticipate that, you know, as the town's work on housing continues, we would be bringing back for discussion and potentially amendments to the bylaw next year to just sort of see how this is working over a year, see if it is resulting in, you know, the more smaller units actually being able to be built. If it's not, think about why, think about the ways that the town can, you know, support families and homeowners who have a single family home now and want to consider this, but what are the barriers? What are the opportunities? Are there ways to continue to support that? Those are all discussions we anticipate continuing into the next year.
Very good. Site plan review. Language has been added to the criteria that the board may use when permitting a project that requires site plan review. A big one in the past with some projects that we've had is lighting. We didn't have language for lighting, and please speak up, Martha, if I say anything out of sort, but we didn't have any lighting, so we've got some wording in the bylaw for light pollution and dark sky compliance standards for the exterior lighting on some of the projects that may come in the future. And energy, water, and resource efficient design. The other thing was to be in compliance with the municipal stormwater MS4. There's going to be a provision regarding pre-construction meetings is added to the language to be compliant with the Massachusetts municipal separate stormwater system. Do you have anything to add to that, Martha?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, I think that the language that was added to the design criteria is important. As Woody said, the board has struggled with this for some of the applications, as our site plan review bylaw has been on the books for quite some time. And, you know, we've become aware with some projects that there actually are issues with light pollution, and certainly given everything that's going on, we want to make sure that the projects are as energy, water, and resource efficient as possible. So the board really felt that it would be helpful to add these provisions. And regarding the compliance with our stormwater general permit, we do have a consultant on board who reviews our bylaw from time to time, and noted that we needed to add this provision regarding pre-construction meetings, particularly with respect to you know, observing pre and post or construction stormwater management controls. So that's the genesis for that particular provision.
Thank you. Thank you, Martha.
For anyone who doesn't really understand dark sky compliant, there's a good actually a good visual here on the slide. But also just think if somebody were taking a spotlight and shining it up in the sky, and those were your neighbors. Or some, you know, you had a couple of sites around you that were not complying with the dark sky provision. It would be hard to see the sky ever. So that's something that Newbury does not want to have. We want to have everything as natural as possible, and this is possible to make it this way. The exterior lighting, be compliant.
Yes, thank you, Mary. And part of the dock stock compliance is light trespass onto adjacent properties. Part of this is to keep the lighting facing down on site where it's proposed, and not up at the sky or trespassing into neighboring properties. So thank you, Mary, for bringing that up.
And Woody, I might just add one thing.
Yeah, go
One of
right
the things,
ahead.
one of the things about dark sky compliance is, we are in an environmentally sensitive area. We're on a flyway for migratory birds. Of course, lights
Yeah,
distract migratory birds. And if you were to go to Cornell's website, you can track migration. You can track sky pollution, and it has an effect. So this is also keeping in touch with what our roots are here.
Thank you, Pete.
Good point.
All right, the next slide we have is we're getting into the zoning recodification. And I'll turn it over to Martha and Larry.
All right, thanks, Woody. Shall I proceed, Martha?
Yes, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So now we get to that section that we've identified as zoning recodification. This slide is just a very high level overview of the articles in the zoning bylaw that we're going to be looking at in more detail. Article 1, general provisions. Yeah, you can go on. And I do want to make a point that we're not done with recodification. It's still an ongoing process, but it was felt it was appropriate to bring what has been done to date to town meeting. So for recodification, the purpose, as stated in the slides, to review, update, and reorganize the existing zoning bylaw in order to revise unclear and inconsistent language, to remove and/or revise outdated provisions to align the bylaw with current laws and community goals, to make the bylaw easier to use and understand for both applicants and board members. It's not the purpose to alter the intent of the zoning bylaw. It still remains to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Newbury. The revisions proposed for the 2025 ATM, as I said before, are part of a longer-term zoning bylaw review and update conducted by staff, board members, and town council. So if we could go to the next slide. So the purpose of intent, I think we've seen this, haven't we? Oh, I'm sorry. The amendment to 97-1, purpose and intent, is to update and replace with new language that is consistent with current provisions of Mass General laws. The updates include items such as conflicts between this bylaw and other bylaws and covenants, validity of actions taken before effective date of this bylaw, severability of certain provisions if found to be invalid, scope and applicability of the zoning bylaw, etc. I think you can move on. Whoever's handling the, can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, we are on the next slide. I'm sorry. So in 5A and general, the language added to provide procedural guidance and decision criteria for general special permit applications. Again, these apply to the special permit section. It benefits both applicants and the board. For the OSRD, open space residential development, language amended and added to clarify certain provisions of the bylaw. One provision I think I'll touch on, if I may. Currently, as written, the OSRD requires a developer of 4 or more lots to first apply for an OSRD special permit. The language has been amended to make that permissive rather than mandatory. And the reason for that, and that's got some attention, but the reason for that is to bring us into compliance with a court case. The Massachusetts Appellate Court has ruled that you cannot require a developer to apply for an OSRD special permit. You can only give them the opportunity to apply. So that's the reason why we're going from a mandatory requirement to a permissive requirement. And right now it requires, or it provides for an OSRD for projects of 4 or more lots. And I'm told that there might be something under consideration to change that to 3 lots. And I can't speak to that. Martha, can you speak to that at all? That's about all I know about it.
Sure. In talking with town council, when we made the change from shall submit an application to may submit an application, it became clear that change in language was actually precluding the possibility of submitting an OSRD special permit application for something that was 4 lots or smaller. Before the lot number was essentially a threshold, which was determined. It was felt that it would be uneconomical potentially for a developer to submit an OSRD for a very small subdivision. So it felt, the board at the time felt that having the larger threshold would be appropriate. But in this case, it may be that there could be a developer who would want to submit an OSRD of, say, 3 lots. And the way the language is written, once it gets changed to may, is that they would not be able to submit that. So one of the things that we did want to talk with the board tonight was changing that number to 3. So that they may submit an OSRD application if for a subdivision of 3 lots or more.
All right, thanks, Martha. Another thing too, and through the permitting process, we did identify some difficulties in interpretation of the OSRD as it relates to condominium form of development. The OSRD is the only place in our bylaws where condominiums are permitted. And there's language proposed to tighten that language up so that everybody understands what needs to be done. And also 97.5D on common driveways, it's adding language to amend and clarify certain provisions regarding the common driveway design specifications and application requirements. I'll move on unless anyone has anything further on that. Okay. In a nutshell, now that marijuana dispensaries or medical marijuana and recreational marijuana are both allowed in Massachusetts, there's really no need to have 2 separate bylaws. So if my memory serves, the medical marijuana bylaw was passed before the recreational bylaw, recreational use became legal. And again, if my memory serves on that. Anyway, we don't need 2 separate marijuana bylaws. And the whole point here is simply to include them in one bylaw. And next, customary home occupation. This actually came out of a court case in which an applicant applied for a special permit to the planning board for doggy daycare. And the special permit was denied and it was appealed. And because the proposal in this particular case would have also qualified under our language for customary home occupation, the court basically ruled that the customary home occupation provisions trumped the table of use regulations. So this is to correct that and make it clear that if not just doggy daycares, but any occupation or use that is identified as requiring a special permit under the table of use regulations cannot be considered a customary home occupation. And lastly, administration. We're adding language to clarify the granting and enforcement of building permits and granting of variances in written definitions section updated with new and revised definitions. And I understand in particular the language regarding building permits was suggested by town council. And I think that's all I have, Woody.
Thank you so much, Larry. And the guidance of town council is very important. They're very helpful for the board. So that concludes that part of the slides. We're on to questions, comments, and discussion. Are there any questions from the public at this time? If there is, please raise your hand and we'll address you in the order that the hands are raised.
Yeah, David Pell has his hand raised. Woody.
Yes, David, go right ahead. Please, please say your name and ask a question, please.
David, you're still on mute, actually.
Yeah, I can't see him.
Still can't hear you.
David,
Yeah.
you're still muted.
Am I unmuted now?
We can
Yeah.
hear you now, David. Thank you.
Okay,
Good.
thank you. Okay. Try to make sense of the order of things here. I sent an email to Kristen, which I think she forwarded to all the members of the board. Am I correct that you got that last week?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody has seen that.
Yes.
So since you just sort of changed the order of things a little bit, I had comments in relation to the first item, which concerns the, I'm having to look at my comments here, the purpose and intent. Okay, can someone please address the reason for what's in that item and my comments about it?
Do you, David, I could share your comments on the screen, or do you want to read them for people
sure.
listening?
I can read them if you like, or I can essentially do them for you. Essentially, I understand the reason for doing this in terms of removing the old language and the necessity to have new language as required by the state law. However, looking at what is now proposed, what I'm finding is that first of all, there's a phrase in there, and that I need to look at here so I get it correct. Okay, to increase the amenities of the town. And I think I'm confused as to why that is in this particular part of the zoning, because first of all, that phrase in and of itself, you could drive a truck through in terms of what it means. Entirely dependent upon what people see as an amenity and what people see as an improvement. And so I would feel that to include that phrase, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of essentially arguments that you don't want to get into. I also think, in addition, that frankly, it is not the purpose of zoning to do that task. In other words, to provide amenities in the town. So to hear from the member of the board as to why they left this in there. Nobody wants to speak to that.
Well, I will say that this is language that did come directly from town council. And we did not have any discussion about that particular provision. So,
Well, okay, that does move to a slightly secondary concern, and that is I am concerned that town council should not be writing zoning. Town council should be reviewing for its legality in relation to state laws and to also to the demands and desires of the planning board. So I would really want that to be removed. The other thing is I'm essentially confused by the fact that the purpose and intent are covered by the first two articles, A, or two items, A and B, and also perhaps item F, but all the other items have nothing to do with purpose or intent. They have to do with conditions that apply. I don't know how we do describe them to be acceptable as legal language, but they are sort of conditioning as to how the purpose and intent is to be interpreted. I think they need to be segregated, and I think that item F needs to become item C and so once again, what do you think?
So I'd be happy to share that article if the board wants to just see specifically what David's referring to, in case it's not in front of you, and then for the benefit of others.
Yes, please,
Um,
Kristen.
Woody, can I ask David a
Yes, go-
question?
Yes, go right ahead.
Sure. Are you saying just to get rid of that word and substitute it for something else that seems more appropriate? Amenities could be, toothpaste, shampoo, whatever, Are you asking that we not use the word amenity, even though it was proposed by legal counsel, that we actually come up with a word that's more appropriate? Is that right, David?
No, I'm proposing you remove the whole phrase.
Okay,
That the purpose of zoning, as defined by Chapter 40 Mass Law, is not to increase anything. And it certainly isn't to increase amenities. And frankly, town council should have known that. So,
thanks, David.
so how are you going to, if amendments to what you're proposing are proposed tonight, how are you going to deal with that? That's what we need, another thing we need to do to move this process along, because there are a couple of other things that I need to talk about.
Well, speaking for myself, I'm not troubled by the language. And David, it almost sounds like, to your larger point about what ought to be in here and what ought not to be in here, it almost sounds like your problem is with the the section heading, purpose and intent, rather than, I don't see anything in here that I would think is inappropriate to have in his own, in the general provisions of his zoning bylaw. It's just one person's opinion.
You don't find increasing amenities you find that to be an appropriate purpose for the plan?
I do.
For zoning?
Yes,
Do you know what zoning is about, Larry?
I don't need a lecture from you. I'm just giving you my honest opinion. The language has been drafted by council. I'm, for one, very reluctant to amend any language that's been drafted by legal counsel. I'm not troubled by it. You are troubled by it. You're entitled to your opinion, and I respect it.
Okay. Fine.
I'm just one member.
David, if I could, you know, we as a board rely on guidance from our support staff, which we now have 3, who do a lot of homework for us and bring information to us. A lot of the information that they are given, of course, is from council. And the reason that we have council is they have more understanding of law, experience with law, and appreciation of change in direction. So we rely on the people that are most attuned to change. And so when council and any organization that I'm involved with, and I'm involved with a number of different boards and different organizations, whenever I need guidance, I go to council to say, where are we with the situation? And this is what we have received. And so I have to trust the consultants that are available to the community to direct the community in its best interest. So I tend to always follow that lead. And that's been my operation in pretty much every organization I've ever been involved in.
Doesn't mean those comments are not vetted. They're vetted, but you're saying take it on face value, that it's good advice. Is that correct, Pete?
Correct. And yes.
Okay. David, did you have anything else?
Well, I think probably not, because I think obviously the tenor of the discussion doesn't include moving away from things that seem to have been identified by town council. And if you're determined to take the advice of town council as being what you would like to prescribe as being zoning, then I probably have nothing very much further to say on any of the topics, because that essentially means that a discussion from basically how Larry put it isn't on the table.
David, I wouldn't want you to feel that way. I mean, for instance, Martha brought something up tonight for the board to discuss what we're going to do with regards to units for USRD 304. I mean, this is why we have discussion. This is why we have conversation. Sometimes we don't agree on things, but you should not feel shut down in any manner. It's just that when council tells me something, I usually follow that recommendation because they usually know something that I don't. And that's me personally.
Right, okay, but let's try and think this through in terms of relation to this particular phrase. Why did town council put this phrase in there when it clearly doesn't apply to zoning?
What I would suggest is that we will ask council that exact question, and then staff will get back to you with council's reply. Will that help you?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, good, good.
Well, let me say that I think that phrase does apply to zoning, at least in the context of a special permit. Excuse me, special permit applications. And that's really what special permits are all about. Well, I shouldn't say all about, but that's an important factor. So I would disagree with you respectfully that it has no application in zoning. Doesn't have an application for every type of petition. And it doesn't have an application for dimensional variances, for example, but
But okay, in relation to special permits, I can see in terms of amenities perhaps, but increase is not your function. If it was, you should be out there recruiting. You should be out there as a body looking to pull into the town. And you're not. I'm not saying you personally, but I mean, the planning board doesn't do that.
all right, well, I think Pete's suggestion is a good one. We'll run this by town council. I don't know if we're going to complete this public hearing tonight or not. If we don't, then we'll have an opportunity to revisit again before we send this on to the select board. If we do, it might be right for an amendment on the floor of town meeting. And there's another point you made, David, that I think was well taken on my part, by me anyway, that had to do with why there was no reference to housing, for example, or a reference to the most recent
Master plan.
Master plan, those are the
master
other.
plan. Thank you. And I thought that would I thought those comments were very appropriate, and I think maybe we can also run that by town council as to why that language ought not to be included.
Good point, Larry. I think they're very well taken as well. It's an overview. It's a look from the top, looking down, saying what are we doing here and why? And you have a master plan that's new, that took a long time to develop. And you have a mandate from the state where we are in compliance as far as we've gone. We've worked very hard to, well, Martha and everyone else, but to be sure that we are complying with the state. And so those two things are overarching issues. Well taken.
Well, thank you, Mary. I would definitely agree. That's why I put them in there. And by the way, one of the things I tend to do when I'm looking to review stuff like this, frankly, is to look at what other communities in the state are doing. And one of the things I discovered was that many communities that are reasonably like ours are indeed including just those two things. In other words, a mention of housing, because housing is this incredible issue currently throughout the state. And I mean, it underlies the whole reason for 40B and a whole bunch of things like that. Plus, the master plan issue is also one that has come to the fore in other communities where master plans have been done and essentially abandoned because they haven't been given as a purpose and intent of the planning board. So I would really encourage that. I guess the only other one item that I feel fairly strongly about, if we can move to that, because it comes under the section of special permits, which we were talking about, and that is this change from shall to may and the number issue. And
David, sorry, I want to bring up that next one, but can I, before I leave sharing this Article 1, can I just make one comment for the benefit of this discussion, or one potential suggestion, which is the current purpose and intent section, which is shown here. Can you guys all see that at the top? It's strike through language. I just want to point out that the current bylaw has a phrase about housing in it. And I appreciate that this has been pointed out tonight, and I think it wouldn't be an unreasonable consideration by the board to just keep this phrase, like not have it stricken, not have it removed, and include this phrase, which David has brought up as being a part of our current bylaw, but somehow we lost it in the new language. And then just briefly, I would just say this other phrase here about facilitate the adequate provisions of transportation, water supply, drainage, sewage, schools, parks, open space, and other public requirements. That's, in my mind, that category of public benefits, if you will, could also, the word amenities could also translate as meaning some of those things: parks, open space, water supply. I mean, some of them are not an amenity, they're a need and a requirement of a healthy community. But I do think some of the effort with the new language is just to simplify a little bit. So two things potentially to consider: keeping the housing phrase, and then
that's what I would point out. Thank you, Kristen, is it says to facilitate. All right, not to increase. That's my point is, and Mary, I'm sure will appreciate this. Words have specific meanings in specific contexts, and to talk about increasing the amenities does not go with the purpose of zoning, but to facilitate amenities, I think, is not a good word. It needs to be something else. That's what I'm talking about here, is to increase the amenities is essentially, as I said earlier, a phrase you could drive a truck through because it's so vague. Whereas if you have a long list, it isn't. If you want to remove the list, then you have to find something that describes it. But facilitation and increase are not the same. Is that fair?
Fair.
Great.
okay, thank you for just holding on that for a minute. So which section 5, is that what we're going to next?
Yes, 5C.
Yes, right. The change from will to shall, and from shall to may, and the number issue. And the only thing I would say, I would ask for a clarification as to the legal issue that was quoted. Somebody said there was, okay, this is right, right, there you go. Right. That's right now up there. Yes, by the way, there's a nasty time lag on channel 9, which is about a few seconds behind where we are in real time. Okay, so what you see there is the change which is being proposed. And what was the legal reason for this? I'm sorry.
I was the one who raised that issue. There was a Massachusetts appeals court case that came down 2 or 3 years ago. I don't recall the name of the case.
It was, if I may, it's the Wall Street development case.
It's the Wall Street development case. Thank you, Martha. And basically, what the court said is that because an applicant has a right under Mass General laws to apply for a conventional subdivision, the town cannot limit that right through bylaw by requiring an OSRD application from, as a preliminary step from the developer. And it certainly, the OSRD is certainly favored, but the courts just said we can't make them do it, is the short answer. That we can allow them to do it, but we can't make them do it. And I think Martha explained earlier that the rationale from going to 4 to 3 was, and this is new to me as of today. It's because if I understood you, Martha, changing shall to may means that someone cannot apply for any for an OSRD with less than 4 units.
Right, right.
Is that correct?
That's correct. For actually less than 5, because right
Less
now
than
it reads,
5.
yeah, it reads for more than 4 units.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Right.
So
So
you
the
want to make
suggest
it more than 3 or more than 2?
3 or more.
3 or
So-
more.
Right.
Okay. And and the purpose, if I understand you correctly, is to encourage the OSRD form.
Right. And to allow somebody, you know, it may, if somebody has, say, a 3 or 4 acre parcel, which might have a yield plan of 3 units, and they feel that they can make an OSRD work, then we certainly don't want to preclude that possibility.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so back to my comment. Thank you, Larry, for the clarification. Then, okay, having been long time ago the original rewriter of the OSRD, that was why I was really concerned to see the change of language, but obviously the courts have had their say. I would suggest then at this point, if that is the issue, the need for the change, that I would think to provide a language that encourages people to submit OSRDs. And I don't quite know how that would be done. But, at this point, I understand about the lot and the unit limit. The only thing I would raise there as a question is, since there's a requirement to have a specific percentage of qualifying upland open space, right, Martha?
That's correct.
Are we going to have small developments which would even qualify to have an OSRD? And
Right.
whether one changes the word application to review. In other words, what you encourage people to do who are looking at a certain number of units, and I would suggest it's probably larger, like 6 or 8, to review the feasibility of an OSRD and submit that to the planning board to say essentially, no, they don't think it'll work, or yes, shall we go ahead? Okay, in other words, it needs to be a little more to allow, I think, for more options. That's all I'm suggesting now.
So, I'm sorry for the interruption, David, but
That's okay.
if we included that would create more than 4 lots of units, are encouraged to, but not required, or are encouraged but not required to submit an application for OSRD to the planning board. Would that be better language?
Yeah,
So if I may, and Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong on this, or Dan, we did have a conversation with town council about that. And she felt that that would actually be something to put in our subdivision rules and regs, so that somebody who is applying for a subdivision would also, there we could encourage them or require them to submit, you know, a basic OSRD plan to see if it would work.
I personally think that's the place.
But not something that we
Summary
could
of
do.
our conversation, Martha.
Yeah.
And I will just kind of add out of context. I've had several conversations with other planners, one of the environmental planners at the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. A lot of towns are kind of struggling with their OSRDs right now, partially due to this court case, but partially from some of my conversations, it's people aren't really doing them. She actually, the woman I was talking with, was quite surprised and impressed to hear that Newbury actually has seen some of these. And I will add that, you know, I had a call from a developer who was asking me if there's anything in the bylaw that prohibits an OSRD of 3 lots, because he actually likes doing those kinds of developments. So I'm just kind of flagging that context and saying, I do think in our discussions of this, we ended up feeling like making our bylaw not inconsistent with the law was important. Secondly, it was important to not prohibit the possibility if someone's interested in it and can meet all the other requirements, a certain amount of upland, you know, frontage, all the rest. But this is also an area I think that merits a more thorough review of all the regulations and how they work with the bylaw potentially. So this isn't, I guess I'll just say, I don't feel like these updates are the end of the story with OSRDs.
Right. I mean, definitely, I think we've all come away feeling that we do need to review the regulations. And that would be the next step. And to your point, David, that is really where the requirements for the yield plan are in the regulations. So I know that was one of your comments.
yeah. Well, I think, you know, putting together what you were saying earlier, what Kristen has just said, and my concern here is I think that it may be that one needs a subtler set of conditions stated whereby you don't discourage people thinking that somehow their project is too small, but you continue to really encourage people with large projects to think about this, because I mean, one of the why this is a little bit of history. One of the reasons why this came about in the first place is partly because David Mountain, who's somebody I think all of you know of. If you didn't know him, you certainly know of him. He was the planning board chair for many years. And he was very much behind this. And when I came onto the planning board, this is why we decided, based on the experience with Caldwell Farms and what was going on with the other one down by the Byfield Church, that we needed to revise the OSRD as it was drafted, because it came from an outside organization in the state, et cetera, et cetera. And what we did at that point was essentially to try to deal with the issue that this town has so much land which is not buildable for various reasons. And a lot of that land was getting, how shall I say, confused with land that was buildable. And there had been a number of attempted projects which eventually had fallen through because somehow you couldn't square all the things that needed to be done. And so that's part of how this came about. But clearly it was a blunt instrument, I'm afraid. And I take responsibility for the fact that it was in many ways something of a blunt instrument. And I would just encourage at this point to think about what Kristen's suggesting, and that is that it needs more thorough revision, and it probably at this point needs to have, well, obviously does need to have the shall taken out. And then you move on later to make it a better instrument to use.
Okay,
Well, I think the shall is it's already struck, right?
Yes, yeah. So
Okay.
the change in this provision was to change the number, as Kristen said, to, allow the potential for a smaller subdivision.
Yes.
I think that makes really good sense, Martha.
yes, it would say 3 or more, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I would support that, certainly.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the change would read an applicant for any subdivision of land or development that will create 3 or more lots or units may submit an application for an OSRD. Is that
How about
correct?
courage to?
One more time, David.
Is encouraged to.
I think may is the opportunity, and may allows for it. I don't know if we want to put language that encourages something. I think we just want to say, yes, you may, or you may not. And it's up to an applicant. If they'd like to, they can.
Encourage it. Why don't you want to encourage it, Peter?
I think May says it.
Well, as was discussed earlier, I think that language is probably better in the subdivision regs. I mean, ultimately, the only encouragement that we can give them is the density bonus when you get down to it.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
think
what
that's
other
where the
type of
incentives-
encouragement you can provide.
Okay. That's a suggestion.
Okay. Thank you, David. If you don't have anything else to add, thank you for,
Thank you, David.
I appreciate it. That, are there any other raised hands? Kristen, do you see any?
I do not see any right now.
Okay. How does the board feel with the changes we just made now and with all of this? Does anyone feel there's anything pressing that needs to go to town council? Or are we happy with this and we'll close the public hearing and move it on to the select board? And if I'm forgetting anything, someone please speak up.
If I may, there are a few tweaks to the language in some of these bylaws from the versions that you had seen previously or the ones that were submitted to the select board. Nothing major, but got a few for the recodification ones, and I think there might be some in floodplain as well.
Oh, yes, yep. So you'd like to go through those now, Martha?
Yes, I think it'd be good for the board to see those
Okay,
before any vote is taken.
Yeah,
yep.
Or-
Kristen,
well, the issue I identified in concerning the citation for the yield plan being missing. You want-
Yes, and I think you're right. It is chapter 112 and it should be referenced there.
Yeah, I just would seem to me to be something that doesn't require a vast change of language, but it does mean that somebody needs to know where to go.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right about that.
Okay, fine, thank you.
all right, thank you, David.
Thanks.
Do you have the language, Kristen, that you put up for this?
So Martha, which one do you want to look at?
So we just went through the OSRD. I think everybody's comfortable with that. I do agree with David that in the I think it's the one about basic maximum number. The chapter reference for the regs should be inserted to that, but otherwise the next one was under special permits, the common driveways, just a small suggested change.
Okay, that's the same
Same one, yeah.
section. Can you remind me what section that is?
Yeah, so it's 95D and we're looking at 97.5D 4B8.
Okay. Is it before or after OSRD?
It's after.
Here it is. Okay.
Yep. Yep, so keep going down a little bit. It's in red. So right here, the 08. So we had added this provision for waivers from the design specifications. And the way it was written before was the board may waive strict compliance with any of these common driveway specifications if it deems the waivers in the public interest and does not impact public safety, and if written record is kept of such waivers and the reasons for them. Very minor suggestion to add the language if it deems the waiver is consistent with the purpose and intent of this common driveway bylaw, is in the public interest, etc. And that's suggested just because there's similar languages elsewhere in the bylaw, making sure that it is consistent with the purpose and intent.
Does anyone have any comments on that, or
I'm good.
everyone think that's reasonable?
Fine with it.
Yeah, for most everyone.
All
right, and-
Rock and roll, Wayne.
And what's the next one, Martha?
And then the next one was actually in 9711. There were tweaks to a couple of the definitions.
Okay.
So the first one is building height, and this is not a change, but after discussion, there's been some back and forth about this one after discussion with the building commissioner. His preference would be to leave it the way we have it. There had been a suggestion that roof decks not be excluded and cupolas. So the definition that you've seen before is what stands right now. And I just wanted to point that out. The next one is lot frontage. And so it was a change in this first sentence. It originally read, "The continuous portion of the line separating a lot from a street to which the owner of the lot has a legal right of access." And it said, "to which the owner could provide for vehicular access from the principal building." And after discussing with town council, it was thought that it would be better to switch the to and the from. So it reads, "from which the owner could provide for vehicular access to the principal building."
Okay.
And then the last one was the definition for structure. If you recall, the last time there were some different variations of language in that one. And following discussion with our building commissioner and also with town council, it was felt that the best thing to do would be to make it consistent with Mass Building Code, which is what's written here in red. So I'm happy to read it if you'd like, or you can read it yourselves.
We had a discussion on this a couple weeks ago.
Yes, yeah, and there were various options for the language that we kind of talked through and tried to parse it, but both the building commissioner really felt that it would be beneficial to just make it consistent with the building code, and that's how he would interpret it, and town council was in agreement with that.
I concur.
Very good. Everyone else happy with that change?
Yep.
Okay. And is that it, Martha, or did you have another one?
That was it for those.
So we have just a couple quick things in the ADU bylaw and the floodplain bylaw. Dan, maybe I'll let you take the ADU first if you want. I'll find it. Sorry.
I have it here if you want me to bring it up.
Oh, wait, that's not it.
No.
No, that's where we just were.
How's the double screen looking, Kristen?
It's not. I'm all on one screen. Okay. Do you want to bring it up, Dan? I think you have it open.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll get the floodplain ready.
Can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes.
So there's been a few changes from what you guys have seen. They're here in red. So under definitions, gross floor area has changed. I'm gonna leave that up on the screen, let you guys read it.
Can Dan, can you get that make it larger?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Does that work?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Is there anybody who has any comments or concerns about the change in definition there?
I don't. Speak up if you do.
I have none.
All right,
Okay.
so I'm hearing none. I'm gonna go on to the next one. So bus station is now a location serving as a point of embarkation for any bus operated by a transit authority. That was important as part of the new law. And then I think that was it. So the bus stop change and then the gross floor area. I'll leave up the bus station section as well. if anybody wants to discuss further.
If anyone has any questions, please speak up. I don't have any questions myself.
I don't have any either.
None here.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Mary.
I'm
And,
gonna stop sharing then.
yep, and then there was another item, Kristen?
All right. So as you all know, the floodplain regulation, flood hazard overlay district bylaw is a long one, and all of the changes arise from the change in the maps and updates to the requirements to allow Newbury to stay consistent with FEMA's requirements so that our residents can remain in the flood insurance program. So there's quite a bit of strike through and bold italics. It's a little bit overwhelming, but I think it's important to know that this has come directly from the model bylaw that's been DCR has helped every community reviewing each and every municipality's bylaw to assure that people do stay consistent with the regulations and the requirements, and also extensive review by our town council. So what is different from the last several times the planning board has reviewed this is a couple things came in since our last discussion from DCR. None of them big, just things that were deemed unnecessary. This particular provision is being recommended that it's basically redundant. And what is here doesn't have as much detail as it has elsewhere. So it's just not needed here because it's covered elsewhere. So striking this section that shows here is one change. And then this section, in these zones, all recreational vehicles placed on a site must be elevated and anchored in accordance with ... This was mistakenly left out of the model bylaw, as this is the comment from DCR's floodplain management council that the town needs to add the A and AO zones to this list of zones where this is applicable. It was previously missed due to a typo in the Massachusetts model bylaw. So adding those.
Okay,
Let's see. This was a recommendation that temporary be defined here. It said temporary non-residential structures in connection with fishing, growing, harvesting, storage. These are permitted uses. So we've just proposed to add the phrase temporary non-residential structure used for 180 days or less to clarify that. And then this one, recommend removing this building code regulation still applies to structures, to these structures if they're in the floodplain. So again, this is to make sure this bylaw is not inconsistent with building code. I think that's, oh no, one more. So this, this is the last one. This was again from the review by DCR. Recommends removing this because the only references to the word alter in this bylaw are in definitions that refer to altering structures. This, as you see, is bold italic language. So this is a definition that town council initially recommended we add into our bylaw. So I am recommending to the board that we keep it in, unless we hear from town council that it should be removed. We haven't gotten that final opinion from town council yet, so my recommendation is we bring this question to her and specifically get an answer, but at the moment, I think because the recommendation initially came to add this bold language, we should keep it in. And it's the state DCR isn't saying there's any problem with it. They're just saying you don't need it. So those are the changes that have come through the final review by DCR. And that's how we're recommending they be handled. Everything else is consistent with what you've seen at several other meetings already.
Very good. Any questions on the revisions suggested by DCR?
Yeah, so Kristen, if we voted to approve as is, and then town council recommended removal of that language, would there need to be an amendment at the town meeting, or?
I think that would be how it was handled. I'm not sure. Actually, Martha, maybe you can help me with this. If we received the recommendation in advance of the select board voting to put the article on the warrant, could the select board approve the change?
That's a good question. I think it would probably have to be an amendment from the floor at town meeting. So it seems to me that there would be two options. One would be to actually keep the hearing open and try to get that guidance, or to vote tonight to close the hearing and approve the language as is and amend from the floor if it seems that language needs to come out.
Well, it's not painful language, right? It's just, could we vote to approve? We move forward as is to town, or the second select board to town meeting, and then at a future date, make this change. I'm just trying to streamline.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's sort of how I interpret this. Again, it was initially recommended by town council to include this. And I don't think DCR's comment about not needing it there's no necessary conflict with including it. It's just determined to not be needed. So I think it could be removed without having any different in the applicability of this bylaw, or how it's interpreted by the floodplain administrator or anything else. It's sort of extraneous. That's my interpretation.
Well, Kristen, why does DCR say it's not needed? Is it because it's a matter of general laws?
It's just what I know is this comment, the recommend removing this. The only references to alter in this bylaw are in definitions that refer to altering structures, which this does not apply to. So
Oh, that came from the state.
that's the state's comment. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Kristen, since we talked about this being a living document at the beginning of the meeting, is this one of these things that would be cleaned up subsequently, along with other housekeeping things, 6 months or 9 months from now?
Yeah, it definitely could be modified in the future.
Well, can we switch gears for a second? I'm not quite sure where we stand on the language for Article 1 general provisions that we had the discussion about. Have we a consensus on that language, or are we going to send something to town council? Because if we have a couple of things that need to go to town council, then maybe we ought to do that before we finalize anything. Hate to have to meet again unnecessarily, but
You mean the may versus the shall?
I'm sorry.
What was it exactly that you were speaking to?
You know, the discussion we had with David Powell about amenities and the definition of amenities. And Kristen looked at some language to suggested that we keep. Have we resolved that? Do we have that language? Or is it something I thought we were going to send to town council, as Pete had suggested?
And I thought that's where the board landed, was to send it to council.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we have two areas, items of review for town council. We probably should resolve before sending this up to the select board.
So you would say, get it to town council, get resolved.
And then
Keep
vote it.
Keep the
It's
hearing
a lot
open.
cleaner than having to make a motion on town meeting floor. And
Yeah,
it's-
I mean, that's where I was going. I mean, I just think an amendment at town meeting, it complicates things.
Either that, or it would be some sort of qualified motion to approve, subject to review by town council or something, but that's kind of clumsy too, for something this sensitive.
Okay. So we'll keep the public hearing open. And what is everyone's? The date we would have to have our next public hearing would be I'm looking for the date. I'm sorry, I don't want to speak.
Next
26.
Wednesday.
Yeah, next Wednesday,
26th.
2/26. Is everybody available on that date?
Yeah, I'm available. You wanted to do it at 6:30, correct? But
Yes, to help Peter. It would be better for Pete if we did it at 6:30 as opposed to 7,
I could do it 6:30 for Pete.
okay?
should be a
Mary?
short meeting.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes, you would think. Yeah, you're available, Mary? Okay, great.
Yes. So is this 6:30 meeting to resolve this issue that we just talked about, those two issues, right?
Yes.
Okay, so is
Yeah,
this
and to cl-
well, what I call a short meeting, in and out, nobody gets hurt, right?
Hopefully, we would we would resolve the two issues, close the public hearing, and then vote to send it off to town council, off to the select board, excuse me. If I said that correctly,
I think you did.
Yeah.
okay. So,
I would like a little more clarity on this one that I'm sharing with, because I'm not clear what the question to town council is. I know David made comments about the language. We've had some discussion, but I want to make sure I understand what the board is asking of town council.
Well, I think, I'll tell you how I understand it, Kristen, under Part B purpose would be to see if we could include a reference regarding housing in the current master plan. And also whether or not we could find some better language regarding increase or amenities. You had suggested bringing down some language above that had been stricken, which looked good to me. Or just strike the to increase the amenities of the town. It's, you know, it's.
I guess that's what I just want to see if the board would like to propose what they want, and then we can have
Alright.
town council review it. If
Was
it
that
would be
language?
able, if we need more discussion, I'm sure she will want to know, not to give advice, but to review the proposed language for legality.
So the meeting on the 26th would be solely to answer those two issues. Is that correct, Kristen? To have town
The
council,
meeting on the 26th is to review the final language in the
Right.
proposed amendments and to refer the amendments to the select board.
right, but we pretty much did all of that except the two issues that are hanging chads, right?
Correct. But I
Okay.
want to make sure if we talk with town council in advance of the meeting, I want to make sure the questions the board has about language are answered in advance.
Well, Kristen, maybe you know, under A, the purpose and intent, you know, number one was completely struck. Was there a reason why it was completely struck? You know, from a process point or just not necessary? I mean, any idea behind that?
Well, it was struck and replaced with this section B. It's
Okay.
alternative language is the way I read it. But Martha, do you recall any more specificity around this section?
No, I think that's correct. It was just felt that the new language was more updated and concise and consistent with you know, Mass General Law.
And so we're looking to plug in, oh, you're highlighting it now, okay. To encourage housing for persons of all income level. And that's we're gonna slide that into somewhere in B, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so the housing one, we're discussing adding back in. And then this one, we're discussing, what's the question exactly?
The word amenities.
Would the
would
board
be-
like to consider removing it or revising it or I don't think we probably should get into group writing, but we could, you know, similarly put language from up here, propose that some of this language similar to the
Yeah,
housing
yes, just
phrase.
cut and paste it down. Well, paste it down there.
So are you saying cut and paste to facilitate the adequate, in place
Yeah.
of, to increase the amenities of the town?
So if I could, just to throw a little more cloudiness into what we're now talking about. Amenities covers it all. And if you don't list it, then you're excluding it.
No, that's a good point.
So that one word, and now as I think about it, and this might help David digest this better. If we just say to encourage housing for persons of all income level, and that's it, then we're missing all the other stuff that's in this net that we're trying to incorporate. So I think appreciating that amenities covers all above, but it has been stricken, and maybe some other things we're not thinking about. So I'm getting more comfortable with leaving that language as it is and understanding the thought process without having the conversation.
Sounds good to me, actually, Pete.
I as well.
So keep it as is, the whole thing, or still have this question included?
Let's just keep it as is. That's my vote.
I think you can keep it as is, Kristen, and then you can just bring back to the board her explanation of why she chose that word. And
Yeah,
I think what it's going to be reflective of is what we just kind of worked through the conversation. that rather than list everything and by chance exclude something, that one concept, that one word incorporates it all.
Okay,
Okay, so
Very good.
Yeah.
Right. Is there
And-
anything
and-
else?
and, you know, before we
Go ahead.
jump off that, Woody, I see that David put his hand up, and David, does that explanation make sense to you now?
No, I just, okay, if you look at the list, which I can't do, the long list, which has gotten struck out, which are where it says facilitate, etc. Many of the items, I don't know whether you know this, but this was in the original drafting of zoning introduced in the 60s in this country, okay? And if you look at that list, it reflects the thinking of that time, talks about transportation, it talks about schools, talks about all the things that in those days were within the purview of an individual community. Many of those things now are not within the purview of an individual community, and therefore essentially become discharged from any involvement of an individual planning board. And so that was the reason I think that was taken out. And I can understand that. What I am trying to indicate is that the phrase as it stands could allow somebody to come along and say, an ice cream parlor is an amenity. And then you get into a silly argument about what amenities are. And also, as I said, the function of the planning board is not to increase things. Facilitate, yes. If you were to increase things, you would be a very different kind of board acting in a very different kind of way, in my understanding of that word, okay? But to facilitate, that's what you do. People bring stuff to you and you facilitate, all right? The only way in which you perhaps initiate things is in what you're doing right now, which is in the revision of zoning, which is a very important task, and I understand and I commend you for doing it. But please, you know, language is language, and in the case of the town council recommending this, I think to ask if it was indeed Lisa Mead, to ask her, you know, whether she thinks that is a reasonable and perfectly accurate replacement for what was taken out. And I think she would have to say, no, it's ended up rather different. And in a way, it's not helpful. You don't have to have it anyway, seems to me.
So are you saying, David, that we should allow town council to make the decision that we're trying to make right now?
Well, I don't know if I would suggest facilitate stays and amenities. There has to be a better word.
Well, I mean, in my business, amenities are swimming pools, tennis courts, club
Okay.
rooms, gymnasiums, you name it, just desirable things.
Yeah.
You know, by definition, you know, amenity is a desirable, useful feature or facility of a building or place. Quote, heating is regarded as a basic amenity. So, by the definition, you know, I would think that transportation, water supply, drainage, sewage, schools, I mean, those are basic amenities.
I think, Scott, that David's saying that there's a denotation and a connotation, not to get grammatical, but some, you know, there's the hard definition of it, and then there's what people perceive it to be, which is how it's used. And you're saying it's being used.
No, I don't disagree. That's probably where he's, well, is that what you think, David?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch. You said something about disagreeing, no?
Scott, do you want to ask your question again, or are you all set?
Sure. I mean, I guess, David, what are you perceiving, amenity to mean? I mean, is it something that the town doesn't like necessarily need? Something that it desires but doesn't need, like swimming pools and
Well-
public tennis courts, or, or amenities, basic amenities such as, sewer, water, open space.
See, I think sewer and water are services and not amenities. Perhaps community amenities would be better. Okay, to facilitate community amenities. That
Actually, Actually, I think that's a very good suggestion, David,
Thank you.
to increase to increase community amenities of the town.
No, not increase, Peter, facilitate.
Facilitate.
Make happen.
Job isn't to increase anything.
Facilitate.
Help make happen.
To
Mhm.
facilitate. Repeat that one more time, please. To facilitate community amenities. of the
Facilitate
town.
the community amenities of the town, or I think, as David said, the community. One on the same.
Correct. Okay. It works for me.
Okay,
Me as well.
so thank you, and sorry to dwell a little longer, but I think that was useful to talk through a little. I think Martha and Dan and I can have the conversation with town council. She has office hours on Monday, so if we get feedback, we can bring it back to the board, make a suggestion, provide her explanations of some of these questions, and then the meeting on the 26th, which we were about to, I think Woody was about to help us take a vote to continue, should be a short meeting. We'll be reviewing this section and the floodplain, the couple floodplain changes.
Woody, would you like a motion to continue to the 26th at 6:30?
Yes, that would be great.
You have it.
Second.
Okay, do I,
Second for me.
did I just have 3 seconds?
Second.
Okay, a second. Thank you, Mary, for the
Mhm.
meeting minutes. Thank you. All those, roll call vote. All those in favor. Peter,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes, yes.
and Steve,
Sure thing.
and I vote yes as well. So, we don't have any more raised hands. We don't have any more questions, any more comments. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
And I'll
Thank
second.
you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Larry.
Hold on. If I may, Chair Knight, I just would like to extend
Yeah.
a reminder to the board that we have a site walk on the 25th at 10 a.m. at Gadsden Lane, in case any of you have forgotten. Just wanted to remind the board. Site walk,
Thank you.
Gadsden, 25th,
Thank
10 a.m.
you. Thank you so much. That's next Tuesday, Daniel, right?
Yes, sir, at 10 a.m.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, we have a motion to adjourn in a second. All those in favor, Peter,
Yes, sir.
Larry,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes,
Scott?
guys.
Yes.
and Steve.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks, Woody.
See you guys.
Great meeting.